My name is Punusami Kalastri. I am 67 years old. Presently now I run a security firm. I'm also the president of the Chetti Melaka Association Singapore. Although we have been in existence in Melaka, the village Kampung Chetti they call in Gajah since actually the 14th, 15th century. But our ancestors, there was a diaspora of Chetti Melaka to Singapore. Reason being that we were then under the Straits Settlement, and the British uh, were able to recruit quite a number of our community members to come over to Singapore and to be in the civil service. So our background of the Chetti Melaka are basically civil service personnel, and of course professions such as lawyers and accountants, and not forgetting the businessmen then, because we are traders from the beginning. We were traders. The businessmen follow suit and come over to Singapore, and that was when the British recruited the civil service to over to Singapore. Yeah, the older generation now, of course, they are no more. They've gone. But the one very known personality that I remember is M.T. Pillay. And M.T. Pillay was the one who had brought quite a number of Chetti Melaka from Gajah and get them involved into various jobs in Singapore as well. And of course, my grand uncle, his name is Supramaniam Chetti. Now, he was staying in uh, Serangoon Road in Little India towards the end of Cuff Road, and that's why now you have Chitty Road. So Chitty Road, I probably would have thought that would have derived from the name, his name, Supramaniam Chitty, and there's also many other Chitty members who are staying around the area. Yeah. Basically, after school, I was in the National Youth Leadership Training Institute, and from there, I joined the uh, army and was commissioned as an army officer. I was there for many years, 10 years as a regular, and another 20 years as a reservist officer, as a major in the army. So that was my career. When I left the regular service, I started my own security firm, and I run a security firm providing security and investigation services in Singapore and the region as well, till today.
My name is Gerald Francis Pillay, or General Pillay in short. I am Chetti Melaka, and that's the reason why I'm here. I'm 79 years old, which means that I've lived across a fair span of time, going back to 1934 when I was born. I lived in Malacca until 1949, and then moved over to Singapore and have resided here ever since. The family, better get this in, my family moved to Singapore because they wanted better opportunity, educational opportunity for me. The Chetti Malakas lived quietly in their kampong with no opportunity to move about or seek employment outside their own community. And my father was born in 1900, 31st December 1900, and his name in full is Odiang Pillay, and later on when he became a Catholic, is Francis Joseph Pillay. And he's always been known as Francis, among his later friends and Odiang in the Chetti Melaka community. We never quite found out who his dad was. Neither did we know the name of his mother, strangely. So he was brought up by Nenek Katai. He completed school in 1918, 1917. He completed the junior Cambridge. There was no senior Cambridge at that time. And he joined the civil service. He was posted as chief clerk of the Malacca Volunteer Corps. It was during this time that he began to socialize with the English-educated community. And then he met my mother, who was a Eurasian girl, who was a teacher in Johor Bahru, Johor English College, and they married in 1931. We were able to come to Singapore because M.T. Pillay invited him to stay in his house. His house was full of people. He said, I got room for you. And because of that, we were able to come over. And it took him, it was a few months before we got our own quarters. But that was the beginning of my association with the Singapore Chetti Melaka community. Because the M.T. Pillay community house, he was the doyen and the leader of the community. All the Chetti Melakas in Singapore would turn up at his place for lunch. It's a sort of a community thing, you know, and especially on feast days. Maybe more on feast days than maybe not every Sunday, but you know, most Sundays. And that's where we used to meet, and that's where we used to talk and exchange, and that's where we talk about where to get a new job and who's got a new job and which are the new girls of interest. You know, there never was a community like that in Malacca, which there was in Singapore in M.T. Pillay's time. He died in 1960. He died in 1960. I call him Uncle Baba.
I'm Krishnan Pillay. I'm 53. My parents are Pillay Pakiri and T. Marimutu Pillay. Both of them are Malacca Chettis. My father was born in Malacca, grew up in the Malacca Chetti village, and his family actually crossed the causeway in the mid-50s to settle in Singapore. Because they saw that there's an opportunity to eke out a living. My mom and my dad, they know one another as relatives. Yeah, so I think my mom set eyes on my dad very early on, and so and decided that that's the man that she wanted to marry. Yeah, my mother lived more comfortably because her father used to work for the British Treasury, and I think he was one of the first few Asians that actually worked at a high-profile post, and so he could spend on the children, and at the same time he accommodated other families that had probably come from the Malacca Chetti village to settle in Singapore. So he was like the M.T. Pillay is his name. A lot of people talk about him. He was said to be, the person who the British trusted, when it came to the time when the Japanese were invading Singapore, and he was given a role in which he fulfilled it to the best of his ability, and therefore at the end of the war he was accorded the member of the British Empire. Yeah. So my grandfather, my mom's father, has a stature that and reputation that a lot of people still talk about up to today. So there's, if they were to say, oh, this is M.T. Pillay's grandson, suddenly there's a halo above my head. And of course, I relish that and cherish that, and know that, belong to a family that is well recognized for their sense of otherness. Because of his role, because of his work in the government circles, the colonial government circles, he had the money to really spend on the family as well as other people who probably needed time to transit from Malacca to Singapore, and so he provided shelter. I hear stories from my parents about, from my mother especially, about how there were close to 3 or 4 families that lived under one roof, and they all contributed to the merriment that there was in that family, So he provided, I guess, the stability, and everybody, felt that they could live up to the ideals and the principles that he believed in, and that and therefore he created opportunities by also recommending some of them to for jobs. I think that's why they felt indebted to him, in many ways. And I heard that he was very generous with the way in which he gave to other family members, relatives, and as well as those who are not related to him directly, and we also know of my grandfather for adopting other people's children. I was told that my grandfather, M.T. Pillay, was bestowed the duty to destroy the money that was in the treasury that belonged to the British government, colonial government, so that the money would not fall into the hands of the Japanese, right? And the reason why my grandfather was given the key to the safe was because he was trusted for his integrity. And so the story that went was that he burnt the money without keeping any for himself, otherwise we all would have been richer. The other story was, this was S.R. Nathan who told us this story, the president of Singapore, when the first Malacca Chetti, the launch of Mr. Samuel Dorosingham's book was made. I think Mr. S.R. Nathan graced the occasion, and I happened to, somebody pointed me to him, and when he heard that I was M.T. Pillay's grandson, that he told me that there was this home that he had at Ceylon Road, that was I think attacked by the Japanese, probably because they found out that he was responsible for playing this part for the British government, and so there was I think some shell that was dropped onto that home, but everyone, all the other homes were not destroyed, so he said that was the home was targeted because they found out a little bit more about his role during the Japanese invasion.
Yeah, my name is Nathan Pillay. I'm born in Singapore. My father's name is A.V. Pillay. He has a nickname called Ambi. My mother's name is Sivagami Pillay, but since young they call her Rose. Yeah, my father was born in Singapore. His father also born in Singapore, but his grandmother is a Chetti Melaka and his mother is a Chetti Melaka. Now, my mother's mother passed away soon after my mother's birth, so I do not know my paternal grandmother's features and all that. My paternal grandmother name is Avirami Pillay. She wears a sarong and a long dress up to here. So my grandfather is M.T. Pillay, born in Malacca, adopted by the Pillay family. So he adopted the name of Pillay. So he came to Singapore in the 30s, late 30s, to work in the civil service. I think during the Japanese occupation, most probably he was in Singapore. After the war, he brought his family, including my mother, to Singapore, and many other Chetti Malakas followed him because he held a high position in the British civil service. He found jobs for many of the Chetti Melaka, and many of them were civil servants in Singapore. And that time you didn't have the Public Service Commission. He just tell them, you become a clerk, you become this, you become that, and they just adopted them into the civil service. Yeah, they call him the Accountant General of Singapore, although technically it must be one British guy who's Accountant General, but he was running the whole matter. Chetti Malakas in Malacca, majority are Hindus, but those that came from Malacca to Singapore, it started off, they are all Hindus. From my grandfather, N.T. Pillay, he became a Catholic in 1960. From then onwards, many of the Chetti Melaka in Singapore have become Catholics or Christians.
I am Nelly Rao. I was born in November 30th, 1926. I am Nelachi Pillay.
First, the maiden name.
Middle name. And later become Nelly Rao. I was born in 1926, November 30th, 1926. I was born in Negri, Milan. And I was there until I was in primary school. Then my father was transferred to Sithambaram, and I joined French convent because I couldn't get a place in the government school, so I was in the French convent. My father's name was P. full stop, Adi Pillay. Adi is his name, and Pillay is the clan name. He was the chief clerk. We were in Linguist Milan for some years. And then when he was about to go on pension, he went to Malacca. He was born in Malacca. In my family, my uncle, the late Mr. M.T. Pillay, arrived and settled in Singapore in the early 20s. That is before World War II. I moved to Singapore in the early 50s. I want to get more money. Yeah, that's my reason of coming to Singapore. And I also wanted to be a teacher all the time. So I said, Singapore is the place where you can get a good place to learn. I was teaching in a private school. When I was living with my uncle, M.T. Pillay, at that time, I rent a room and I lived there. And I went to Teachers Training College for 3 years. I went to New Zealand because I was a very hardworking teacher. I do a lot of apparatus, and most of my friends will borrow my apparatus when they go for practice. And the lecturers know where this apparatus come from. They recognize. When the inspector of schools saw what I use for the blind, then work passed round, then they always ask me to demonstrate for them to follow. I was very happy and honored to be chosen. Yeah, one school for the blind.
Where is it?
Toa Payoh Rise.
It's always there.
Yeah.
How many students does it
At
have?
that time, very few, about 10 to 15.
Then later on, when it gets
Increase, yeah.
at the peak was how much?
150.
Wow. So how many teachers did you have?
That time we have about 6, I think. 6 of us.
So you were the principal.
Yeah.
How long were you the principal?
For some time. I went to secondary school where the blind studying there. And I helped those teachers.
How would they go?
Integrate with the normal school. And there I will be there also and help the normal school teachers how to make the apparatus for them. And one became a history specialist.
Oh.
Yeah, Deborah.
Hi, my name is Alfred George Pillay. I'm 54 years old. You want to have my full name? My full name is Alfred George Pillay, son of Adi Sithambaram Pillay. My grandfather was Adi Sithambaram, and my mother's side was MT Pillay. My mom was from Singapore. My dad was from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I was a police officer for 31 and a half years. And my mom said that it was my father's dream to be a police officer. He went for interview 12 times and she said, you better take the job and live your father's dream. And I said, okay. So I came over to Singapore when I was 19, joined the police force for 31 and a half years. And while I was in the police force, I had experience doing events for the government. So for that long, when I retired, I decided it's time to follow my dream. So I came out and started to do entertainment as a MC, singing, coordinating of events as a career. I was growing up in Johor Bahru. That's where I was family home. But every Sunday, we make a trip down to Singapore to meet up with family. So we were quite a very close knitted family. I used to go to my grandmother's house and spend time with my great grandmother. My great grandmother actually outlived my grandmother. His name was Adi Sithambaram, and he used to own some plantations. Actually, my grandfather was rather rich. He had a car, driver, and I actually had a chance to visit the home that my father grew up in. We made a trip to Melaka, and we went. Of course, it's a car workshop right now, but it's quite a huge house with a lot of land. Rubber estates, rubber estates. But they were all like sold off when we were very young, so they were all sold off. My father was working with the telecoms in Malaysia. He was all the way in Johor Bahru.
Saya jagalah tu bunga punya pokok semua saya jaga.
Kat mana Tiban?
Tiban arsip. Saya pagi pergi, saya suka-suka saja, dia orang tak paksa saya. Saya tolong saja. Tu bunga punya kerja lah. Saya tanam, sapu, ada watering, tu macam lah. Jaga sembang Eden. Habis dia orang arsip, orang ada tiket free, dia panggil ke saya. Minggu saya ada jalan. Saya semua ada masuk dalam tu. Saya ada jalan satu blok 20, blok 30, 25. Satu bulan satu kali, hari Minggu pagi muter jalan. Jalan nanti dia kasih air, kasih apple, kasih roti. Habis tu ada dia main lucky draw lah, makan-makan. Macam ada nyanyi-nyanyi tu macam lah saja. Ada satu perempuan, Esther, dia sama saya jangan. Kalau saya mau pergi mana, saya kasih tahu Esther saya tak datang. Lu boleh tengok agak siram ke apa ke dia ni. Kalau dia tak datang, dia kasih tahu saya. Dia mau pergi luar negeri, bibi buat tak datang, bibi jaga garden. Macam lah, sama-sama. Tak ada, dia orang tanam sayur. Dia orang bayar 1 tahun RM24. Dia orang punya sayur tanam. Dia orang bikin dia punya, jaga dia punya sayur. dia siram apa. Kalau ada paip bocor ke apa-apa semua, saya mau telefon kasih tahu. Ini ada tu ikan motor tak ada jalan ke apa-apa dalam tu garden, saya mau kasih tahu lah.